Good evening to everyone present virtually here. Welcome to the Women's World, a sneak peek into the PhD Life event organized by Jitesha Scholarship for Promising Freshmen. I am Sweda, a final year Electronics and Communication Engineering student of NIT Trichy, a premier engineering and architecture institution in India. As we all know, tomorrow is International Women's Day, and various organizations across the globe are conducting events of different kinds to celebrate women. We at JSPF are conducting this event to elevate and celebrate women who are pursuing their PhD degree. Historically, women had to fight for their right to education, and it is still a challenge for many women. Most of us attending today's session would have noticed the stark disparity in terms of gender ratio in STEM fields. Consequently, the number of women pursuing a PhD degree or just any form of higher education is extremely small. This can be extended to even other research fields as well. While the reasons for this may be many, it is imperative that we motivate the women in our lives to pursue their academic dreams. And one way to do this is to provide relatable role models for women who have overcome their own unique struggles and have achieved in their pursuits. Bringing together five panelists today who are all accomplished doctoral women candidates across the globe in various interdisciplinary fields, the JSPF community is conducting this event with that exact hope to motivate and inspire aspiring women PhD candidates. But for a true change to occur, the responsibility lies not just with the women, but with all of us. That's why I'm confident that everyone watching today's event would have something valuable to take away. Before I introduce the panelists for the evening, let me give a brief introduction about the scholarship itself. The Jiteshrat Scholarship for Promising Freshmen was founded in 2017 in honor of Jiteshraj Peresami, who was an undergraduate student of NIT Trichy. Upholding Jitesh's values of curiosity and societal contribution, the scholarship is aimed at nurturing and celebrating students who have the curiosity to explore, perseverance, growth mindset, and the will to bring about a change. This event is a modest way for the JSPF community to contribute back to the student community. Moving on to the panelist introduction, our first panelist for the evening is Shruti Badole, who is pursuing her PhD in astrophysics at the University of Manchester. The second panelist is Asala Mahachna, a PhD candidate at the European Centre of Excellence for Sustainable Water Technology. The third panelist is from our very own institution, NIT Trichy. She is Shiba Anandi, who is pursuing her PhD thesis in physics. The fourth panelist is Vrinda Somjit, who is also an alumnus of our institution. At MIT, she is working in the field of materials science and engineering for her doctoral thesis. The fifth panelist is Ruth Oreyama. She is pursuing her PhD in the field of economics at University of Strasbourg. She is also an African fellow at the World Bank. We also had another panelist by the name Sabrina Osmani, who is pursuing her PhD at Harvard University in the field of creative artificial intelligence, who unfortunately could not join us this evening. The moderator for today's event would be Jay Matingi S, a pre-final year student at NIT Trichy from the Department of Electrical and Electronics Engineering. She is a JSPF finalist of the 2018 to 19 application cycle. She will be asking questions pertaining to the PhD life and the flavor women bring to the research community. Audiences can post their questions in the comments, which will be open throughout the event. We hope you enjoy today's discussion. Over to you, Jaya.
Thank you, Sweda. A very good evening to one and all present here. Once again, I'd like to extend a very warm welcome to all the six panelists today who are very accomplished women pursuing their doctoral studies in different fields and in different parts of the world. Let's have a very fruitful discussion, and I hope we all would learn a lot today. So without any further delay, let's move into our discussion. So firstly, if you talk about a PhD, it's a very big commitment, right? So how do you know if one is cut out for pursuing a PhD? And does a general interest towards the field suffice to begin with? Shruti, what do you think? Shruti, just a minute. I think you're on mute.
Oh my God, I'm so sorry. Really
Sorry.
sorry about that. Okay. First of all, thank you very much for having me. I'm really delighted to be here. So, regarding whether you're cut out to do a PhD or not, so of course you have to ask yourself: do you envision yourself pursuing a PhD or studying that topic for at least the next 3 to 4 years? So that's a very basic thing you should ask yourself. And secondly, I think this is something I emphasize on a lot. Definitely do try to take up research projects in your undergrad. Like try to do research internships. If you can do a research project with any faculty in your department, please try to do that. Because, and as we said, it's a big commitment, and it is very important to know um, what being in a research environment is like. So I always recommend people to do a master's, and I'm stressing on this because I'm aware that a lot of PhD programs in the USA which accept undergraduate students. So definitely do a master's, especially if you do not have a research background during your undergrad. So I think those two are the things you must think about. Thank you.
Great, thank you for that. And Brinda, would you like to add on to this?
Yeah, thanks. Thanks, Jaya. Thanks to everyone for having me here. I think Shruti covered all of the important points about research internships and making sure you know how long of a time commitment this is. And in the US, in fact, it can be a little longer, like 5 to 6 years. So you need to really know if you're in it for the long haul. One other point that I just wanted to make is it's very different from undergrad or master's experience, because in such experiences you have coursework, right? So you have like a set number of things to study, and then you're tested on it, and then you move on. Like you get feedback and you can correct yourself very easily and very quickly. Research is not like that, so it requires a lot of self-discipline and like setting milestones for yourself. So that's an important distinction I would make. And make sure another very basic thing is that make sure you check the department website, university websites, because the structure is very different. It can be very different across departments in the same university, and it's of course different across universities, across countries. So make sure you see that distinction and find a department and university that suits your needs.
Absolutely. Thanks a lot for that insight. Shiba, would you like to add on to this?
Yeah, first of all, thank you for the invitation and the nice introduction. I'm glad to be a part of this PhD students panel discussion. So coming to these questions, as an interest to do research is of course important if the person is very passionate towards research. But that alone wouldn't suffice, because there are certain criteria an institute or university would expect in a candidate applying for a PhD position. So in addition to the zeal, your CGPA and your score in a competitive examination would also play an important role in determining you to be a suitable individual to pursue PhD. That's all I want to add on. Thank you.
Great, thanks a lot. So let's move on to the next question. This is a very interesting one. So while you're doing a PhD, is it the passion for the cause that is the result of your PhD, or the love for the research that you do, that is the process that motivates you every day? Would Ruth like to start off with your opinion?
Yes, thank you so much, and also thank you for the invite. Really glad to be a part of this panel. So I will say it's a mixture of both the end result and the process, because definitely if you're getting into your research, that is something you have thought about to achieve at the end. And I think what makes the process interesting really is just the process of doing the research. In my opinion, you get to learn a lot, and doing research is a skill that can be transferred to other fields. So by learning and applying this skill on your specific project, and knowing that in future projects you can also apply this skill, that's what really makes the process interesting. And there's so many interesting things that you can do within the 3-4 years or 2 years that you're doing in the research. So the spirit of learning, I think, is very important in the entire process. Thank you.
Absolutely, that's great. Asala, would you also like to share your thoughts?
Yes, first, I also would like to thank you for inviting me to this panel. And I would like to add to what Ruth said is that when you're doing research and development, you are investigating something that no one else have investigated. So if you put too much hope on the end result, you might be disappointed because sometimes we are working on a project for 4 years and we find that what we thought might be possible is not possible. What we thought uh, that something might be feasible is not feasible in reality. And within your research and development project, you might have different stages in which you change the direction of your research. So if you are too too attached to the end result, you might be disappointed in research and development. That's why I advise people who want to do research and development to approach doing a PhD with an open mind and look at it as an experience rather than a target. You know what I mean?
Great, thanks a lot, Asala. Before we move ahead, we are joined by our sixth panelist for today, Sabrina. She joined late, so welcome, Sabrina. We're really happy to have you here. So let's move on with our next.
Thank you so much. I was having a technical issue, but it's resolved now. But thank you so much for having me.
Yeah. So let's move ahead to our next question for today. So why do you think there's a stark disparity in the number of women taking up STEM-related fields and in specific STEM research? Vrinda, what do you think?
Yeah, this is a very deep question, and like there have been a lot of studies on this. So from what I've read and what I also experienced is, first of all, representation matters, right? If women don't see themselves in positions of leadership or like in our case, PhD positions in certain universities or certain departments, they don't tend to apply there, so they self-select out of the process. So that's a problem. And then there's also this unconscious bias that comes into play, where there's this all of a sudden, like there's going to be this sort of men's club where male researchers pick only male grad students or postdocs into their teams, and then it can be either unconscious or conscious, unfortunately. And especially for women with multiple marginalized identities, right? So if you're a woman of color, these sort of biases come into play a lot more. And finally, it could also be that PhD programs and just in general STEM needs to be more friendly in terms of family needs as well. So because we're entering this point when many women and men would want to start families, universities need to create better options for PhD students who are also parents, you know, and there's a lot of initiatives, at least at MIT, to make this process a little more smooth. Yeah, that's all I had to say.
That's very true. So Asala, would you like to add on to this?
Yeah, thank you. I also endorse everything that the other panelists just said, but I would like to also add to that human beings are evolving creatures. You're not only evolving on the physical aspect, you're also evolving on the cultural and societal aspect. Humanity is changing. So I think it has to do with the fact that previously it was normal for women to stay mothers, stay at home moms taking care of the children. And now we are seeing transition in which men and women are creating equal partnership. So both of them are going out to work. Both of them are contributing to the financial stability of the household. Both of them are seeking professional and career fulfillment. And both of them are taking care of the family together. So I think it has to do with the switch and the change. The career world has always been opened to men in all its aspects, whether it was engineering, science, research, business management, politics, and governance, name it, they were there before us. So we are like the newcomers. So it is, of course, harder for us to integrate because we feel like we don't belong, because we are still the minority in the professional world. And we have some people say that women need to prove themselves and work extra hard to say that they belong into their position and their career. So I think it has to do also from where we are coming from and where we are heading to as a human being and as a society. So I think it has also to do with mentality shift and cultural change, and that is gradual, but the change is visible, and we can see that there is progress in that direction. So that's my answer. Thank you.
Yes, that was great. And all thanks to the achievers of the past and also accomplished women like you. It's going to be much easier for the next generation to, make a mark. So moving on to the next question. Will a PhD limit my career to academia and make me overqualified for all other employment sectors? So this is a question that many people have in their mind before they begin. So once again, Asala, would you like to share your thoughts on this?
Yeah, I like this question because this is a question I contemplated myself before starting my PhD. I did my undergraduate degree in environmental engineering, and to develop a career in engineering, it is very valuable to have experience. If you have a good, solid, high quality undergraduate education, you don't really need a PhD to have a very, very successful career in the field of engineering. So when I started to progress, I did an international master's degree, which gave me experience in working in international environment. So that's something that was very clearly added value to my career, having the international work experience while I was doing my master's degree. But then when I came to the PhD, I started to ask myself, where do I go now? And why do I want to do it? So when I spoke to some other professionals in the field, of course, if you are going to do a PhD as an engineer, you are not going to go to a position like an entry level position. You are not going to go to small project management. So once you are more qualified, you will do jobs which requires a higher level of experience. If you are interested in working in the field and managing a group of workers, then maybe a PhD is not for you, and then that is a waste of time. And then you would be in a position where you are investing 4 years into getting a PhD and not getting something back from it. So you need to understand and have a very honest conversation with yourself regarding what do you want to do in your life and what is professionally fulfilling to you, and be very clear about what is your future plan for the next 5 years and 10 years and maybe 20 years of career development. So you need to be very self-aware when it comes to choosing if you want to do a PhD or not. For me, for example, I chose to do a PhD because a PhD would offer me the possibility to gain more knowledge and experience and make me more suited for a position which would serve as an engineering consultancy rather than working in project implementation in the field. So once you have that vision, you could say what is the right answer to this question for yourself. So it depends on you pretty much. Once I decided that I wanted to do consultancy, it was the answer that a PhD is not a waste of time for me. But if I wanted to do field engineering, maybe if I wanted to do design, if I wanted to do team management, perhaps then a PhD would have been a waste of time. So just be honest with yourself and figure out what you want to do. Whatever you choose to do in your professional career is something valuable and is something very important to society.
Great. That was a very detailed explanation, and I hope our viewers would have a lot to learn from your experience as well. So let's move on. So while we talk about development and women, pushing barriers, there is also a cultural aspect that is always involved. So my next question is, have you ever been pressured by parents to finish education early or be ready for marriage while doing a PhD? And have you or do you know women who have taken up higher education as one of the ways to escape marriage? Ruth, what do you think?
Yes, thank you so much. This is a very, pertinent and interesting question. And so, in my experience, I haven't been pressured to, get married by anyone, either my parents or my family. But I do know of colleagues who are pursuing their PhDs, and they have pursued their PhD while getting married. So I will say that the core of it is not to think of maybe PhD as an escape from getting married if the marriage situation is a bit, complicated, or you're being forced into it, or rather marriage is an escape to none is an escape for the other. The central part for me, and at least in my experience, even as a young woman, is to be honest with myself. What is it that at this time makes me happy? What is it that I want to pursue at this time? And if that is increasing my knowledge in a particular field that I'm particularly interested in, then why not? So, and I'm also a very strong believer in the fact that there are lessons for every step of life. So at this time, that there are lessons for me. And if I'm not sure about, maybe I know there are quite be some people who'd be afraid that, well, if they got married and they got a PhD and got a very high-ranking job, then the prospects of marriage are less. I do not think that that is the mentality to have, that there are lessons for every phase of life. And even if you're 35, you're 30, you're 28, and you want to get married, then the lesson for that time will come to you. So my answer would be, do that which you feel is right for you at that given time. And most importantly, keep enjoying it. Thank you.
Yes, great. And I hope we see this shift in perspective very soon. And I hope it always grows into a positive mindset in the future. So moving on to our next question, as one starts their PhD, what are the challenges that they face during the initial stages of pursuing a PhD? Shiba, would you like to share your experience?
Yeah. If you're an experimentalist, the first stage would be about choosing a problem. So here, you have to come up with a novel material or methodology, or sometimes both. Some students often do not find difficulty in the first stage, but then later comes the instrumentation. If you are dependent on a particular instrument and it goes down due to some unavoidable circumstance, either you have to rectify it yourself or you have to wait for it to be rectified. In either case, you might have to wait for days together. If you already have some results, it is quite all right. You could read more and try to consolidate and correlate the results in the meantime, or else it would be quite depressing until your important instrument gets repaired. Just like people become sick, instruments might become faulty, and you can get through that phase. Another difficulty is that sometimes you could be carried away by your research. You might try to explore everything that interests you, which could leave you baffled. When you do a series of experiments, you must be able to connect them. You must be able to put them under the same title. For your thesis chapters cannot be deviating from your title. So see to that you are not overwhelmed and carried away. Just before you begin anything new, check if you can find a link with whatever you have done previously. Yes, that's all.
That's great. Thank you, Shiva. So I'm also interested to know, Sabrina, what would be your answer to this? Because given that you're pursuing your 6th year of PhD, would you like to tell us what are some things that you felt were challenging and what you could have done in order to make it less stressful during the beginning of your PhD?
Yes, that's a question that's very near and dear to me because I think I struggled immensely at the beginning of my PhD. One of the things that I think looking back, doing research, doing doctoral research is about making a contribution that's new, right? And at the beginning of your PhD, you're sort of still getting your feet wet. You're doing coursework, at least in my program, you're doing coursework for 2 years, and that coursework is helping you sort of understand where you are relative, what your lab is doing, what the field has done. And where there is room for innovation, right? So in the sciences, that's the format, at least. And it's quite a difficult process in the beginning when you're sort of getting up to date with you're reading all kinds of papers to find out what kinds of questions are being pursued, what kind of questions are valid questions, what kind of questions have already been answered, what kind of questions can be answered given the resources that you have. So that's, I think, sometimes can be an overwhelming process because you're trying to figure out like where do you fit in, essentially, and you're trying to figure that out as you're gaining knowledge about the field. So it's kind of like it was overwhelming for me, I can say, where I remember my first couple of years, I was like, oh my God, I'm so stressed. Like, what is my PhD question, right? Looking back, I think I should not have been that stressed because that is part of the process. Like you're formulating your PhD question, like what it is that you're trying to find out or contribute is step one of the PhD. And I think it was the hardest part for me, like formulating what it is that I wanted to do before I actually started doing experiments and stuff was pretty tough. And I would say that was a major challenge at the start. Yeah.
Right. Okay. So, Brinda, would you like to add your thoughts on the same?
Yeah, I just wanted to add all of those challenges mentioned by Shiba and Sabrina. I went through the same as well. Another challenge that students could face is your program is structured such that you have to choose a group and an advisor. So I think that's a very critical decision that you need to make because, again, like it's been mentioned repeatedly, it's a long process. So if you don't get along with your advisor and your group, if your management styles don't match, things can become very difficult very quickly. So make sure that you meet multiple professors, meet with the group members, so speak with the graduate students, speak with the postdocs, and speak with, of course, with the professors themselves to find out what their expectations are, what's the group culture like. Ask all those important questions.
Yes, thanks a lot for that tip, Brinda. And Asala, would you also like to pitch in some of your
Yeah, I would
experiences?
like to endorse what Verinda just said. We tend to think of a PhD as only a technical experience and educational experience, but it also has a human interaction component to it. And we're not as independent as we would like to be. We are actually a very interdependent human being, and our performance, also the professional and technical performance, will depend on our psychological well-being during the research. That's why it's very important to choose your supervisor before you choose your university, before you choose your research group, before you choose your research topic. So be very aware about that and take your time while you are looking for research supervisor. I personally am very blessed. I have 4 supervisors. 3 of them are from universities and 1 is from an applied research institute. And I would say I am very lucky and I'm very blessed. But I also hear from a lot of other PhD candidates that this can be quite a struggle. So take your time and look for the right supervisor. Someone you can communicate well with and someone who has the same expectations as you are. Another thing I think is also important to talk about is the challenge of life-work balance. When you go to your PhD, you would probably have high expectations and you would give your all of your energy. You are very dedicated and you would invest your entire life into your PhD, which is good because you can achieve a lot in a short run, but also it's not good for your emotional and psychological well-being. After all, we are human beings, so you need to sleep and you need to work out and you need to be with your family and you need to be with your friends. So that's, I think, is the major challenge for PhD candidates. Some PhDs are very competitive and very dedicated people, and they struggle a lot with a life-work balance. So that's something I personally trying to work on at the moment.
That's great. Off to you, Sabrina. What do you think?
I actually just wanted to echo what Vinada said about the aspect of it working out with an advisor. So it's the way that most programs are structured is that you join a lab, which means that labs are small organizations led by a professor or a principal investigator, PI, and usually the questions that the lab is exploring are questions that the PI is interested in, right? So it's very, very critically important that you choose somebody whom you not only get along with intellectually, so like, they appeal to you, they appeal to the kinds of things that you're interested in exploring, but also on a personal level. It's not unheard of. Actually, I think MIT recently launched this fund for students who are trying to get away from their toxic advisors. It sounds kind of strange and maybe even amusing to say this, but it is not unheard of for people to be stuck with advisors who are perhaps not giving them the mentorship that they need, or forcing them to work on problems that they're not interested in. And those students like struggle very much and end up, spending or sometimes wasting years of their time. And that problem has now been recognized institutionally to help those students who are in those positions where their relationship with their advisor, because of the questions or because of their interpersonal manner, etc., are not working out. I was somebody who switched my advisor in my third year, not because of any interpersonal problems. He was a lovely person, but intellectually, I think that we were very, very much at odds in terms of the nature of the questions that I was interested in pursuing. I think he was a little bit more applied. I was a little bit more like core research. And it became obvious to me in my qualifying exams, which are these exams that you take after your 2 years to qualify as a candidate after being a student. It became obvious to me from the questions that I was being asked in that exam that, like, okay, maybe moving forward I need to switch my advisor. And I was very lucky to have found like other professors and stuff who were like supportive and helped me make the switch at a very critical time. And from that experience, I learned that it's very, very important to be very, very intentional and aware of the choice you make when signing up for a particular advisor.
Thanks a lot, Sabrina. I think that's something that many of us would have not known had you not shared this. And I'm sure all the viewers would, make wise decisions while choosing their advisors. So let's move on to our next question. So while women are still trying to make a mark in the area of research and development, it's really important to have support groups that are present in the colleges and in the labs that would help them pursue their ambitions. So are there any women support groups in your campus? And if yes, do you have any major takeaways or discussions that you can recall from the group? Shruti, I think you are part of such a group, so would you like to add on to this?
I must confess, I'm not like per se part of any group, but indeed there are a lot of women support groups in the University of Manchester. So there are department-specific groups, like we've got women in biology, women in physics, etc. So I think the women in physics group, they organize different kind of activities. Like we got networking sessions, we got meetups, and they organize guest lectures where they invite women physicists to come and speak about their research and how they're navigating their career. We've got this group called Women Researchers Network, where women researchers get together and they speak about any gender-related challenges they might be facing at work. And we've got another organization called VISIT, which stands for Women in Science, Engineering and Technology, which does similar kind of activities to women in physics, like networking events and guest lectures and meetups, etc.
That's great. And Brinda, I hear that MIT has such a support group and you are an active member of the same. So could you share your experience?
Yeah, so MIT has this group called Graduate Women at MIT, and I've been a part of it for a couple of years now. And we do a lot of the things that Shruti mentioned that women's groups in the University of Manchester do. So events and initiatives, catering to like networking events and different types of events to build community. And I just generally think that these sort of groups are just so important because doing a PhD can also become kind of like an isolating process. You're like stuck in your group or your department, and it can become hard to meet with students outside your bubble. So this having groups like this I personally feel that it's very important, and it has a lot to contribute to student life. And another reason I think such groups and diversity, equity, and inclusion groups in general are so important because the student community is so diverse, right? And these groups can use the voice of students to advocate for students' needs, related to DEI issues, issues that international students may face, and that's why groups like these are so important. Yeah, that's all I had to say.
Great, thanks a lot. So I hope we see many more women support groups coming up in many institutes, which would make it easier for all the women out there to expand their horizons. Yeah, so thanks, Brinda. That is a great experience that you shared, and I hope that many more women support groups come up in institutes, which will help women expand their horizons in the field of research and development. So moving ahead, this is a question that pertains to the core research part of your PhD. So what are the exciting things you had fun with while you were, at this point where you were doing your core research? So I open it up to anyone. Shiba, would you like to share your thoughts?
I find the analysis to be very interesting more than the synthesis or characterization of materials. When I follow a certain procedure, I could prepare samples, characterize them, test them, and so on. For me, the beauty of research and the excitement lies in the analysis of the results. You really can't imagine when and how the ideas come to you. And when the ideas come to you, you'll be so thrilled and excited about it. So to me, the excitement lies in making the connection between the relevant features in the correlation. Yes, thank you.
That's great. Shruti, would you like to add on?
Yeah, so my research field is gravitational lensing, which is basically bending of light due to gravity. So it enables us to see really faint sources, like really faint objects, galaxies, which are far away, and due to the gravitational potential of a massive galaxy that is on the line of sight between that object and us. So basically with that, you get to see like really, really far away and really, really faint sources you couldn't have otherwise seen. So I get to do like cool things like this. Like I get for my last project, I managed to study the source structure of a galaxy, a quasar that's 55 million light years away. And
Wow.
these things just put things into perspective. So that's something I really, really like. Like in fact, when you do astronomy, you're like one of the first people to find out something like that quasar hasn't been studied in that resolution ever, and I was the first person to see it, and that's something I really enjoy. It's really like thanks.
That's amazing. So cool. So Ruth, off to you.
Yes. Yeah, thank you so much. Yeah, that's so interesting. I'd also concur that when you get to actually write the results of your research, it's very interesting. And particularly for me, getting to the end where, well, I'm doing research in economics, and then we have policy applications. So getting to the point where, like, for me, I was lucky enough to get through as a World Bank fellow, and then you're working with economies where you're seeing clearly what you are researching is about, how it will translate to policy, and what policy recommendations you could make on the ground, not just on paper using theoretical economics thinking. So that was particularly interesting. Then in addition to that, what was fun was also attending conferences, because especially in some of the social sciences, most of the things we work with are constructs, and it is particularly interesting to see and hear the perspectives of other researchers. So when you get to conferences and, some of the people you've been reading, and you're able to see them presenting some of their novel work, and also articulating some of the recent thinkings they have had, their conceptions of the world, that was very, very interesting. And, eventually at the end of the day, you either go for dinner, as the whole research group. So that is particularly interesting. Then the other thing, as for my university, the PhD students are very interactive. They like to, have fun. So from time to time, maybe at winter time, we can organize for a students' music concert, and you can have, people who you thought are, very strict PhD serious students having to showcase some of their musical talents, which can be astounding. So there are lots and lots of interesting things that you can do in the course of your PhD program. It's not just a space for geeks, it's a space for everybody. And even if it's a space for geeks also have an artistic side which can be expressed in one way or the other. And there are lots of avenues that can allow you to express that side. So thank you, and over.
That's great, Ruth. Thanks a lot for your inputs. So, while we celebrate women in research, academia, and in all phases of development, there are also some very real issues that we should address and talk about and try to change. So, before I move on to the next question, audience discretion is advised, because the next question contains content related to sexual harassment. So, with several sexual harassment cases coming to light in academia, in institutes in India and across the world, are there some measures in the labs you have worked uh, with to address sexual harassment issues? Shruti, would you like to answer this?
Indeed. So my research group and the department, they don't have a framework as such, but the university does. So the University of Manchester, they've got formal set of procedures that you have to follow if you want to report any incident of sexual harassment. There is this website called reportandsupport.manchester.ac.uk, where you can report any incident either anonymously, or you can go and speak to an advisor. The Students' Union, the University of Manchester Students' Union also has an advice service where you can go and speak to an advisor. They have got advisors who are trained to deal with these circumstances, to speak to, they're trained to speak to victims of sexual harassment. And there's one thing worth keeping in mind is that these things are entirely confidential, so you do not have to worry about the information getting public and etc. So yes, there are measures in place.
That's great to know. And Vrinda, would you also like to share your thoughts on the same?
So MIT as well has a framework in place to deal with such issues. And like Shruti also mentioned, we have like a very public and transparent website where we can see all the options available if we want to do informal or formal complaints. How far do we want to take action against the issues we're facing? And I think that's a very key and a very important aspect that universities need to strive for, that all these systems that are in place have to be public and transparent and easy to use. that's just very, very important. Another thing that I just wanted to mention is MIT, at least, we had this online training that all the grad students had to take uh, just before joining. And there these some complaints against online training. Like, of course, it's not as effective as in-person training, but I think something is better than nothing, and that really puts everybody at the same page of what we need to know and where we need to go in case we need to report any complaints. So yeah, I just want to mention that those are the reports in place. And if people are interested, the National Academies of Science, Engineering, and Medicine came out with a report about sexual harassment in academia, and had listed some recommendations. So if you guys are interested in seeing what the research is out there and what universities are striving to do, you could check out that report.
Yes, glad to know that there are so many measures in place, and I hope every institute takes measures towards addressing this. So thanks a lot, Vrinda. So moving on to our next question. Given that how long a PhD journey is, it will definitely have its emotional highs and lows. So how do you motivate yourself when you feel down? So Shiba, would you like to share your experience?
Yeah. If I find something too difficult, I put it on hold and try to do some other task that I find easy. Just the accomplishment, finishing something successfully would be a huge motivation for me. And when I'm stuck at a point for days, then all of a sudden I would get an insight. This is enough. Let me put it again on hold. Let me go have a discussion with my guide. So by the end of the discussion, I would always be motivated. The discussion with my supervisor would help me in understanding the various aspects of the problem that I found it difficult to distinguish what is clear and what is obscure, how to make the obscurity go away, how to test a subtle aspect that wasn't obvious before. So for me, this the huge source of motivation is a short distraction from the difficult situation and discussion with my supervisor. Thank you.
Great, thanks a lot for that tip. So I'm just curious now because Sabrina, you mentioned that you kind of had a mismatch between the way your advisor approached the problem statement versus how you wanted to approach it. So I'm sure you would have gone through certain low points during your PhD. So would you also like to share how you came out of it and emerged?
Yes, I would say there were definitely low points in my PhD, in which I was sort of grappling with. I think to begin with, I was sort of trying to reformulate my own questions so that they would fit my advisor's framework, and that didn't work out very well because it was sort of like, square peg round hole. It wasn't a match. I think for me, the most important thing was talking to other people who could who could provide mentorship to me, right? So the beautiful thing about being part of a university and being part of academia in general, is that people are really open. If you're a curious person, which most people in academia are, because otherwise there's very little reason to be there. People are very open to talking to you and collaborating with you and mentoring you. And I was very, very fortunate. So at Harvard, we're allowed to take, and MIT, we're allowed to take up to 50% of our courses in either university, and even our committee, which is a committee is, you select 3 PhD supervisors to be part of your PhD committee. They can be from Harvard and MIT. So I think I was very, very lucky in terms of like just having a lot of options of people that I could talk to, people that were like interested in helping me, people who I started projects with, other professors and stuff. I think that was the thing that really got me out of a rut. Learning about what other people are doing and being inspired in ways outside of my lab. And I encourage that. Like, I think
That's wonderful. Great.
Oh.
I'm sorry, go ahead. Yeah.
Oh, I just wanted to finish with one last thing. I think that even if you are very happy with your advisor, there is still, within a PhD, there's so much space there's so many people who are doing such amazing, new, and awesome things. So it's not just about being happy or unhappy with your advisor. I would say that exploring is always good, and it'll just open up your mind even more to what's possible, and what you might get interested in things that you might you didn't even know you were interested in. So I encourage that if you end up in a PhD program.
That's great, and really happy to know that the research community is always ready to help you whenever you're stuck. And I think that's going to be a very big factor while you pursue a PhD. So I'm sure that all of us are kind of really happy, and we feel secure when we hear that it's such a collaborative environment out there. So thanks a lot. And Asala, would you also like to share your insights?
Yes, I would like to start by saying life is a struggle. It's not the PhD. No matter what you're going to do in your life, you're going to face challenges, struggles, problems, and some things that you don't expect and you really have not wished for ever. So that's number one. It's not like that struggles only exist in PhD. Struggles exist in every choice, every path in life you're going to choose. So we need to accept life as it is. But personally, in general, whenever I face challenges or failures, and when I feel down, there are two things I do. First, I try to see what I learned from this failure or what can I learn from this struggle in order to make it a learning experience. So instead of looking at it as a failure, as something negative, as something bad, we need to find why did that happen and what can we learn from it moving forward. So don't hate failure, love failure, accept failure, and learn from failure. Number two, very important, as you saw in my poster, I am Palestinian. So when I feel down or I feel that there is a struggle in my life, I tend to practice gratitude. There are many Palestinians around the world, many Palestinian kids who don't even have the right for education, don't have the right for freedom of movement, don't have, uh, shelter, peaceful shelter to live in. So I try to see the good things in my life and to recognize that with my privilege, even though compared to the definition of privilege, I'm not privileged, but I am privileged compared to someone else. So I always try to look at that and say, how can I move forward and try to contribute to any human being or any cause in life that will lift people up instead of allowing one small failure to pull me down. So these are psychological techniques I use. Now in my PhD, I am facing a struggle. My dad is in the hospital. He had a failed surgery, and we almost lost him in the second surgery. This is not good situation for me. I sometimes cannot focus on my work because of this, and I am home supporting my dad at this time. So another thing to remember is that you are a human being and you need to practice self-compassion. Whenever, for example, I thought that by now I would have published literature survey of the field I am working on, and I would have moved into more doing analysis of the data, collected the data, tried a few things already, but this is not the case because of family circumstances for me. So always, 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 whenever you're facing difficulties in life, have self-compassion. Women, especially women of color, tend to be kind of Wonder Womans who work extremely hard, do a lot of sacrifices, and neglect themselves. And I think this is something that women need really to work on, to be self-aware and self-compassionate and self-accepting during difficult times when they are facing difficulties. Not everything. We are here talking about women in career, women in the professional world, women trying to reach high positions in the research field. But at some times in life, career is not number one, and that's okay. Sometimes love is number one, your family is number one, and you don't need to fulfill the expectations of society of what is a Wonder Woman. You need to be true to yourself. This is something we cannot iterate enough in this session. So that's all. Thank you.
Thank you so much for that insight, Asala. It's really great and really inspiring to hear your story and your mantra for actually getting up from failure and in life in general. And we wish your father a very speedy recovery as well
Thank
and
you.
good health.
Thank you.
Jaya, you're on mute.
Yeah. So moving on to the next question. When we talk about feeling low, the next immediate question that comes to mind is about mental health, because mental health is something that needs the most attention in today's world, given that we are in a pandemic situation and we are struggling with a lot of things and adapting to a lot of changes, combined with many problems that we face in our day-to-day lives. So, does your department or university have any measures to take care of the mental health and ensure the mental well-being of students? Shruti, would you like to answer this?
Yeah, absolutely. So one thing I really appreciated when I came to Manchester, to the University of Manchester, was the emphasis on the importance of good mental health. So the university has got a counseling service. So if you're struggling and you want to go and speak to someone, you can do that. The university organizes several kind of workshops, like on meditation and workshops to manage stress, etc. And we've got this thing called DAS, which stands for Disability Advisory and Support Service. So in the UK, legally, officially, the term disability, it covers a wide range of conditions, which includes mental health conditions such as depression and anxiety. So if you're struggling, DAS is something you can also turn to. And the university offers extensions based on medical grounds, and the medical grounds include mental health conditions. And there are a lot of external mental health resources, like external to the university, which the uni promotes a lot. So that's really great to see. That is on the university level. On the department level, we've got a PGR Wellbeing Committee, which is Postgraduate Researchers Wellbeing Committee. So it is entirely student-led. It has got 2 representatives. Both of them are PhD students. And the committee gets funding from the department. And we get to do a lot of nice things with the funding. Example, we got some bean bags. We got a few video games and some board games as well, among many other things. And I know these things may sound frivolous, but I think they are important. They are good reminders that a PhD student's life is not just about sitting in front of a computer and doing research. It's much more than that. And it's really heartening to see that the department, it recognizes this thought, and it supports and encourages this thought. So that's really great to see. And the committee also organizes these sessions called Are You OK?, where students can come together and they can discuss any issues they may be facing. And yeah, and we have got like regular events going on, like we've got film nights, and we've got board game nights, and we've got some different kind of societies in the department itself, like this running society, etc. So we got this really incredible community, student community in my department, and that's one of the things I keep talking about to people. That's one of the things I'm really, really grateful for. So yes, so it's a good place to be.
Great. Thanks a lot for sharing that. And Ruth, would you also like to talk about the facilities at your university?
Yes, thank you. So I will speak to the point where, for instance, you're in your university, but you have not had taken the opportunity to actually familiarize yourself with some of these, tools that the university could have put in place, or sometimes you could be lost in the multiple emails that are provided. I'd say that it's ultimately important to speak with your supervisors because they have been in this experience before, and there's really nothing new under the sun. So if there's something you're experiencing, at least for me, it has worked quite well. I have been through and through frank with my supervisors. Of course, they do provide academic feedback to my work, but in case I'm facing challenges, like I think it was last year I had a challenge with a job I was doing, so I was open to my supervisors and asked them, what would you do if this was the case, because then you could see clearly that it is weighing down on your mental strength or mental capacities to do your PhD. And they offer very valuable advice that could even be applied to other areas. So I'll reiterate that it's important to speak to your supervisors, be frank with them, because at the end of the day, in case you lag behind with your work, then they at least know what is going on, and they could actually help you to devise ways of getting out of the situation that you are in at that point. So thank you, and over.
That's great. Thanks a lot for sharing, Ruth. So moving on to our next question, which is pertaining to diversity, in terms of women in the R&D field. So how has being a woman in the research community helped with respect to diversity? And how has diversity helped advance research and shifted perspectives? So Shiva, would you like to answer this?
Yes. Being a woman in research is not as challenging and lonely as it had been before for women of ancient times. Times have changed. Though we find a considerable amount of women in STEM, the percentage is still poor. A few other points related to this were covered in the discussions of disparity. So, not all men think alike. So if you bring in diversity, there would be a pool of ideas and perspectives which would definitely have a positive effect. Talent, be it from men or women, is capable of astounding, right? So rather than missing out on the talents and perspectives of the women population, it is indeed better to include them and advance together to elevate the degrees of research and development. That's my point.
Thank you so much. So we've talked at great length about what goes into beginning your PhD and then pursuing it, your core research period. And we also spoke a lot about what happens when you feel low and how can you get help. Now, so let's talk about what happens while you're nearing the end of your PhD. So I'm sure there will be a lot of questions going on in your head about what to do next and what's the way ahead. So what are some of the things that go through your mind when you're nearing the end of your PhD? So Sabrina, would you like to answer this?
Sure. I think one of the things that had preoccupied me over the last year, I would say, is do I want to continue doing research in academia, or do I want to, transition out of academia and go into the industry? In my case, like within AI, research is done across both academia and industry. So I had a few options. One is to stay in academia, right, and continue to do research as a postdoc at a university. Another is to go into industry. There's also postdoc positions available in the industry and continue to do research as a researcher, or go into the industry and not do research, do something else entirely, right? And that's a very different sort of direction to go in. It's sort of like, that's the advantage of being in this field in the sciences and in technology in general, is that there's a lot of paths actually. So I saw that there was a question about whether this will like box, doing a PhD will box you into a particular career path. The question is, the answer is no. I think at least in the sciences, the answer is no. There's a lot of different things that you can do, and for me, I think that was the thing that I was grappling with as a PhD student. I think that you get so research is a lot of fun because it's a really good feeling to, well, when the results are good, which takes a lot of time and work and struggle, to be able to say that you discovered something new or you contributed something new, and that can be like, that's kind of a high, it's kind of a rush on its own because you're part of a larger community, and so you sort of come into your own as an individual, as an author, right? And I think the PhD life sort of really primes you to want to keep doing that. And I think in my case, I think I started a PhD not wanting to stay in academia because, academic research is slow, etc. There's a lot of drawbacks. But now that I think about it, having spent 6 years, almost 6 years in the field, I wonder what I would do if I wasn't doing research, right? And so for me, it was realizing that I wanted to continue doing research in academia because of a certain flavor and certain framework of research and certain kinds of people that you meet in academia. So, I mean, yeah, the industry versus academia question was a big one for me. I'm not necessarily saying, once again, I believe that this doesn't necessarily put me in a box. I think that I could still have, even in academia, right? So people in the field, they do all kinds of other things as well. Like you might have a startup on the side, you might be doing consulting, and that depends on the nature of your work, obviously. So those are the kind of questions. I mean, these are exciting questions. These are not like, these are not the kind of stressful questions that you have at the beginning of your PhD. Yeah, I would say those.
Wow, great. Great to hear so many different views and perspectives. And also, thanks for clearing that up about whether you're always stuck into research and academia if you choose to pursue a PhD. So, Shruti would also like to add a few insights into this. Yeah, off to you, Shruti.
Well, I'm not too sure about insights. It's just like ramblings about the things I'm going through. So I'm in my 4th year and I'm planning to submit my thesis, hoping to submit my thesis within the next 3 months, which is daunting and scary. So I'm trying to focus on a lot of things, and that has been really, really challenging. Like I'm trying to focus on writing my thesis, obviously. I'm trying to focus on my research. My research deadline is end of this month, so I need to finish all my research this month, which is scary. I've also been working on this research paper, which I need to finish as soon as possible. And these are just present circumstances. And as Sabrina mentioned, you have to think about jobs as well. So I've been thinking about that as well. So yes, scary and daunting. So I'm applying to like both industry positions as well as academic postdoc positions. And I speak to my friends in my year, my other PhD final year friends. And, the situation is not unique to me. It's something which all PhD final years have to go through, unfortunately. So, yeah, that's those are the questions going on in the mind.
Great. I'm sure that you're gonna figure it out, and all the very best for your next step ahead.
Thank you very much.
So now let's, this is a very fundamental question that's gonna come up now. So we've talked, a lot about what a PhD takes and what one goes through while doing a PhD. It's exciting, of course, but it also has a lot of challenges involved. So why should one pursue a PhD anyway, is the question. So Shiba, would you like to take this up?
Yeah, sure. It's a strange question, isn't it? You want to do something, but then you end up asking why you want to do that. As Asala mentioned, is there a field without challenge? The COVID pandemic has pushed up to the brinks, to the threshold of almost everything we had taken for granted. So when challenges are out there everywhere, wherever we go, why not face the challenges in the field you want to pursue? So out of the 8 billion world population, just 2% of the people pursue PhD. And you know how much that counts to? About 150 million. So wherever you go, there is competition, there are challenges. The passion for doing research, the joy of finding out something that no one ever did before, these are the perks of pursuing PhD. After all, you know that if 150 million people can deal with the challenges brought about by PhD, you can do. That's my point. Thank you.
Yeah, that's great to know. And Ruth, what would be your answer to this?
Yes, thank you. My answer would be to learn, principally. Like in my experience, my initial training was in biochemistry, and when I stepped out into the field, I still had lots and lots of questions, especially pertaining to development and, sustainable development, a bit of, growth and things like that. And I learned very quickly that I had already done my initial training, and nothing really stops me from learning more if there are some pressing questions that I'd want to learn. And then I saw quite few people were actually linking hard sciences with questions of development, science innovation, at least in the context in which I found myself. So I told myself, why not proceed to do extensive research through PhD in subjects, of who the core subject is economics, but apply this to questions on science. So I still think that, at least for me, I believe that the initial training is as good as that, and it allows you to learn. So there's no limit to how much you can keep learning going forward, and more interesting if you keep learning and apply those learnings that you do to very particular contexts. So it's really interesting. It's an adventure. I call it like falling off of a cliff, and you're really not sure where you're going to land, on safe ground, on hard ground, but you keep falling anyway. And through the process, you learn to enjoy it and to live in every moment that is presented to you. Thank you. Over.
Yeah, that's great. So it's the love for learning that drives you and motivates you. That's a great thought. Thank you, Ruth. So with this, we come to the end of the main phase of our discussion, and now we'll be taking up a few audience questions. So stay tuned for the questions. So the first question is, how to know whether we are able to take master's or higher studies after bachelor's? So in a situation, whether to take higher studies or not. So how do you decide? That's the first question. So I open it up to anybody who'd like to answer this. Sabrina, up to you.
Yeah, so thank you so much for that question. I think you have to do a little bit of research about the kind of programs that you're interested in. So PhD programs in the US, for example, a master's is folded into the first 2 years of your PhD are considered a master's. So like, if you were to drop out after your first 2 years, you would drop out with a master's. That's not to say that you should do that, but I'm trying to highlight the fact that you don't necessarily need a master's prior to joining a PhD program. Having said that, it does help sometimes to have that experience and have that sort of preparatory knowledge under your belt. That's not the doing a master's is not the only way you can do that. One other thing that you can do is, even as an undergraduate, you can, depending on your university and if the opportunities like this available, you can join a lab and as a research assistant or as an undergraduate researcher, where you're basically supporting other researchers who are in their PhDs or they're in their postdocs, etc. And that will give you very invaluable experience to understand what it's like to be part of that environment, right? So at the end of the day, like, you want to make a judicious and good decision about what you're about to take on as a PhD and even as a master's, I would say, because both of those things are commitments, one more than the other. But I think if you're really unsure about whether to do it or not, one way is to approach a lab or a professor who does research in an area that you're interested in and request if you can work with them, sort of like an internship. And of course, I know that not everybody has the resources to do an internship and mentorship that easily. But as a student, perhaps, when you're already enrolled in an undergraduate institution, to be able to get mentorship within a lab setting might be a good idea.
Great. Thank you for that question, Jai Raju. So our next question is from V. Teja. Can each of the panelists talk about what they think they did differently that helped them get into their PhD programs? So, Shruti, would you like to start?
Yeah, sure. Thank you. Well, I would like to say I'm not too sure about differently because probably a lot of people do that. But one important component for for the reason I'm here is that I did not give up. And so I must point out that I went to IIT Madras. Point out not because I want to brag, but but because I just want to point out that there were a lot of really smart people surrounding me. Like some of my best friends are some of the smartest people I know. So in such an environment, it's really really easy to get intimidated by the people. And I must tell you that my grades were not good. I mean, they were decent, but they're not like stellar. So in this circumstances, like when you're surrounded by these amazing people, really intelligent people who are going for a PhD, you really start wondering, okay, these people are going for a PhD, but can I go? Like, am I good enough to do that? So one thing that kept me going is I just did not want to give up. It's not in me. Like, I want to try something, and if it doesn't work out, that is fine. But I really do not like giving up. So I went and I just managed to do a master's. Not managed. I did my master's pretty well. Yeah, I did my master's, and then I decided, okay, let me apply for PhD positions, and some just things worked out. So I think if you believe in yourself, you can do things. You can set your mind to. You can do things whatever you set your mind to.
Thanks a lot for that, Shruti. Shiba, would you like to add on?
Yeah. After Bachelor of Science in Physics, I had joined for a Master of Science in Physics at NIT Trichy. So while pursuing a master's, I had only one goal after master to join a PhD. So at that time, the criteria was to qualify a competitive examination. Either it was GATE or NET exam. So I worked really hard to qualify one of these exams. And what was the other thing that motivated me to work really hard for these exams is that I had started a project in my master's, and that project is in the field of magnetism. I was so interested in that if I didn't qualify at that right time, I may not have joined in the same laboratory, because now I'm at NIT Trichy in the same lab because I had qualified in that appropriate time. So for me, the motivation at that time.
Thank you, Shiba. So, moving on, let's go to our next question. So, this is from Anupama Gupta. How to choose a university and professor knowing your area of interest? Ruth, would you like to answer this?
Yes, thank you. As I think one of the panelists answered some moments ago, usually the unit of PhD research is a university laboratory. So I'd say start from there. Start from, well, if you know already a professor or a researcher who's worked on your area of interest, then you can write to them. Then find out what laboratory that they are working with, and the core research questions that they ask in that laboratory. That is very important, because then you know that it tallies at least with your area of interest, and there won't be much friction, and the opportunity for learning, given there's lots of learning that you undergo during your PhD process. So your opportunities for learning will be higher if you're attached to a lab that researches in the area that you're interested in. Then you have identified your professor. At least for me, in the context of universities in France, that was the case. And then write to this professor, ask to have a chat with them, find out what publications they have made before, find out whether maybe there could even be gaps that could be of interest to you. And then since you probably already had some of your research questions, or some of the things that you had at the back of your mind, you can have a discussion about this and you can get integrated into the university. At least that was for me. It did not start from the university going down, but it started from a laboratory and a professor who's interested in my area of research. Then I very easily integrated into the university, but at least for now, most of my interactions are with my professor and my lab mates. So yeah, and lucky enough, that was a very, very good university I got into. And yeah, so that for me was the process. Thank you.
Thank you for the answer, Ruth. So moving on to the next question. So this is from Hariharan Natesh. So this is specifically addressed to Sabrina. So being in the field of computer vision and artificial intelligence, was there a situation where you picked up a problem statement and after spending a significant amount of time, you realized that your solution isn't feasible? If so, how did you handle it, and what would your advice be to fellow researchers in the same field and who are in a similar situation? Optim, sorry.
Yeah, that's a really good question. So in my case, I think that for me, the problem was finding a problem that I felt passionate about and that I could see had a viable solution, right? So of course, at the beginning of starting any project, you don't necessarily know the solution. Otherwise, you wouldn't be a PhD researcher working on a novel problem, obviously. But during the phase that you're developing your problem statement, as you called it correctly, you're not going to you're not allowed to just work on any random thing that you come up with, right? Like, this has to be approved. There is a process. So after 2 years of your coursework, you do your qualifying exams and you present a proposal. Every program is different, but in my case, you present a proposal right after or during your qualifying exam stage, and it has to be approved by a committee of advisors. So 3 professors have to approve this question, and they have to approve that you're at a point where you can carry out that research, right? So it's not as though you're not going to be, you are on your own, definitely you're on your own, but there are checks and balances in place to make sure that you're not taking on something that's completely impossible, right? Having said that, of course, it happens all the time that you start something and you realize this doesn't make sense, or it needs the question has to be reformulated, and more often than not, because you are already in a position where there's been a committee of people who have guided you into a place where the set of problems that you're looking at is sort of viable. So even if you start a problem and it's not solvable immediately, then you can tweak the problem, right? And learning that a problem isn't solvable in a certain way is an important insight, right? You actually learn about something. So some people, even though this is not an ideal scenario that any PhD student wants to be in, but it's not bad either to go through a problem, and the paper that you produce says that this problem cannot be solved by these methods. This is everything that I tried, and I can't solve it like this. So that's also a contribution, right? So that somebody else who comes to this phase, comes to this area of research, knows not to try all of those things that didn't work, right? So that's very much a contribution as well. Of course, it's not an exciting contribution because you really want to make a contribution that you solved a problem. And in that event, I think reformulating and rephrasing a problem is something that is part of the process, actually. It's not, it's almost unheard of that you're going to take on something and then have a solution in the first try. Otherwise, it wouldn't be research. Yeah, I think having good mentors, good supportive mentors, people who understood my set of problems that I was interested in, helped me reformulate them in a way that was feasible for the field, helped me identify technical things that I could use. All of those things helped a lot. And you should not look at this as, it's not like you're not a lone genius where you take on something in a laboratory and you see if it's working or not, and if it doesn't work, it's much more, you're part of a system, and that's a good thing. It's good that you're surrounded by people who are who can help you and correct you where you're wrong and reformulate your questions and your answers as well. So I think that's the takeaway for me, is yes, there's always going to be problems for which the solution wasn't expected as you thought, but that's not the end of the world. It's there's more to build upon, and that in itself is also a contribution to know what's solvable and what's not. And it definitely also builds up your intuition about what kinds of problems to take on next. So I wouldn't think of it as a negative thing at all.
Thanks a lot for that answer, Sabrina. Interestingly, Asala would also like to add on to this as she's also worked on a similar problem. So, off to you, Asala.
Thank you. So the issue of feasibility of a solution is very relevant to engineering problems, especially when you want to do optimization of a system which is very complex and has non-linearity characteristics. So artificial intelligence, AI, machine learning, deep learning, optimization techniques are methods which are used to solve difficult and complex problems in the engineering world. And one of the issues we engineers face is all the time is the solution we are receiving from the algorithm is feasible in the real world. So in order to cope with such a struggle, innovation has introduced something called physically informed neural networks, or you can also apply this to many other aspects of engineering, physically informed optimization. So basically, the entire concept is to combine simulation with optimization techniques. So your simulation package is the part of the algorithm which introduces the physical knowledge you have about your system. So every solution you're going to find from the optimization part of the algorithm must comply with the simulation in order to be a correct solution. Another thing you need to pay attention to when you are dealing with the feasibility of a solution using machine learning, artificial intelligence, or any optimization techniques is, do you have the right physical constraint, the right constraint conditions for your optimization technique? This will depend pretty much on the kind of system you have, the knowledge you have about the system, and whatever physical constraints exist there. So during my master thesis, I worked in developing an automatic leakage detection application for water distribution systems. And that's what we basically did. We formulated an optimization search problem, and we used an optimization tool called particle swarm optimization, combined it with a simulation package, which is the open source EPNet hydraulic simulator, and basically introduced physical knowledge to the particle swarm optimizer, which doesn't know anything about hydraulics or how the physical world works. Basically, those optimization techniques are working with numbers without any understanding of what really goes in the world, in the field. So that's why important to, if you're working on a problem in which you want to find a feasible solution, to always try to combine a simulation package if possible, and always pay very good attention to the constraints you are introducing in your optimization search problem. Thank you.
Great, thanks for those inputs. So we have one final question here. Does the attribute multitasking, which otherwise is looked as a virtue, may come in the way of research which needs focus and single priority? That's an interesting question. So I'm repeating the question. Does the attribute multitasking, which otherwise is looked at as a virtue, may come in the way of research which needs focus? So Asala, would you like to take this up?
Yeah, thank you. I think this is a very good question because previously, in my previous position as a hydraulic engineering advisor for industry and infrastructure at an applied research institute, this topic came up a lot of times. Most people think that women are more skilled at multitasking than men. And many people view multitasking as a good thing. However, some research shows that neither men nor women can multitask. So if you look into some of this research, it's the elephant in the room. So basically, people they are saying that people are neglecting the elephant in the room, which is the top priority task in their agenda, and focusing on maybe replying to emails or having a coffee break or learning about something which is not relevant to the main task that they should do. So yes, it is a huge concern for research and development and consultancy project, because you have to do a lot of communication, you have to do research, you have to do writing, you have to do data acquisition, you have to do data analysis. So you can be overstimulated and then lose focus and not achieve things for 2 weeks and become ineffective at your work. So this is a very hot topic in basically the human resources management field, especially in research institutes. So yes, it has its pros and its cons, but I think for research and development, sometimes it's very important to be highly focused.
Thanks a lot for that answer and for the question. So with this, we've come to the end of the questions from the audience. And thank you very much for pitching in your questions. And so with this, we come to the final and most important question of all. So I would like to know, what advice would each one of you like to give to aspiring women PhD candidates? So, would Asala like to begin?
This is such a big question, but to me, it is take your time and find the right PhD, and realize that it's not only one option. So most people think of a PhD as a specialization track, but you can still find a PhD which can include multi and interdisciplinary in nature. Take your time, do your research, work in between, and get to know the field and the industry before you jump into a PhD. So that's my advice.
Great. Thanks a lot. So, Brinda, would you like to add on?
Yeah, I just want to add that there might be times. So there's this thing called the imposter syndrome, right? Because again, right now, it's, even though it's getting better, we see fewer women again in like top positions and in doing really good research and things like that. And even though it's getting better, there's this thing called imposter syndrome. So you feel like, you know, you don't belong there. I just say that don't listen to that. And if you really want something, just apply for it. And then, yeah, take it from there. Like you miss 100% of the shots you don't take. So yeah, just keep that in mind and just keep plowing ahead.
Wow, that's great. Thanks a lot. So, Shruti, what would your advice be?
There are two things I would like to say. So one of my really close friends in Manchester, she always says to me, Shruti, always remember the known fact that women always think they don't meet all the requirements for a job, whereas men always think they do. So no shade, no shade on men. We all love you. You're great, but that is the truth. Unfortunately, that as women we always undermine and underestimate ourselves, and we really need to stop doing that. And just remember that whatever level of career you are in, whether you're an undergraduate student, a master's, or a PhD, or even not necessarily academia, whatever career you have, you are there because you deserve it. And you should be proud of yourself. So never think you're inferior to any man. And the second point I would quickly like to add is, please support each other. Please support other women. Do not look at other women as your competitors just because they're women. I mean, I guess some level of healthy competition is good, but what is not good is looking at another person and thinking they are your competitor just because she's a woman. So yes, have each other's backs. Thank you.
Thanks a lot for that input, Shruti. And moving on to Ruth. what would your advice be?
Yes, thank you. What I'd say is while it's important to diversify our networks, it's also important to rule your atmosphere. And especially when you're doing a PhD, then get to also have friends who are doing PhDs or who are, or even higher mentors, because more often than not, at least the higher you go, the more specialized you become, the fewer people you find there. So keeping a network that identifies with the problems that or challenges or even opportunities, confusions that you could be having is very, very important. And this also goes to your field of research. Sometimes you can, or, in some of these multidisciplinary fields, you could write your paper and send it to a journal which is not in your discipline. And the researchers there don't understand what it is you want to articulate, while the problem would be that you haven't really found your tribe. So my advice will be to rule your atmosphere, have friends who can relate to what you're going through and uplift you, and also make sure that you have you're in network with people who are in your discipline, so you can be able to very easily and fluidly share best practices amongst each other. So thank you. Over.
That's great. Thanks a lot, Ruth. So, Sabrina, would you like to share your advice?
I think the important things have been said. I want to highlight the imposter complex issue that Mananda brought up. It's true that especially so as a woman and as a woman of color, those things definitely multiply in terms of your sense of do I really, am I smart enough to do this work, or do I really belong here? Have I really earned this position, right? All of these things sort of really can contribute to your sense of feeling out of place, essentially, especially when you're doing a PhD program. I mean, whether you're a man or a woman, a PhD is a very difficult thing to do in the sense that you're going out to do something new that hasn't been done. So you're always, I mean, there's a million doubts in your mind to begin with, and then if you add to that being a woman and being a woman of color, there are more doubts added to that. I'm not saying that it's not there's a lot of support, and it's not that it's not that being a woman is a disadvantage in any way, but I think sometimes we internalize these things unconsciously, and as it was pointed out earlier, like, I think men don't internalize these things. I think they feel a lot more at ease with whatever position and whatever achievement they have, right? And I think that also gives them an unfair advantage. Like, if you're somebody who is confident in what you're approaching, right, maybe sometimes that confidence is not even well informed, right? Sometimes you can be overly confident. I'm not suggesting that you become overly confident, but it's better than being underconfident, right? Like, if you're constantly wallowing in self-doubt, your chances of success are going to be less than somebody who's at ease with themselves and approaching the world as though they totally deserve everything that they have. So I do want to emphasize that point. Another thing that I think is really important for the PhD experience is seeking out mentors, right? So talk to as many people as possible, even people who are outside your area of interest. You never know what's going to interest you, and it'll also give you a better sense of how the different disciplines interact with each other, where you could go possibly after graduation. And I think it's comforting at the end of the day to know that there's people who are interested in your work. And the more people that you have on board interested in your work, they might not be directly involved in your PhD, but if they're aware of your work, then they've already made an investment in you. And that's great. Sorry, 1 second.
Thanks a lot, Sabrina. Yeah. Yeah. So finally, Shiba, what would you like to say?
I would like to say all you have to do is direct your determination. You be strong with your ambition and decisions pertaining to it and work. It is all right to pause and take a short break if things are difficult. Then no matter what, resume. Come back and restart. So resume with the same determination. That itself would drive you to the path you want to go to. You want to take. Yes. Thank you.
That's great. So with this, we've come to the end of our panel discussion, and I must say I thoroughly enjoyed listening to all your views and your insights, and I'm sure I speak on behalf of the audience when I say that it was a very informative session, and we got to learn a lot of things that we would have never known otherwise, in terms of what happens inside your university, what happens when you start off with a problem statement. Each and everything was really informative, and I'm very sure that everybody watching this will definitely take all your tips and all the information that was shared today into consideration before making their choices. Once again, thanks a lot to all the panelists who took their time off to make this event a great success. Thanks a lot. So I would also like to thank Srinivas and Lakshmi Manoharan ma'am for their valuable inputs. And I would also like to thank Shivaranjani ma'am, without whom this event would not have been possible at all. So thanks a lot, Shivaranjani ma'am, for organizing and for ideating this event and making it a grand success. Before we leave and say our goodbyes, let us not forget to uplift women in all aspects of their lives and rights. We hope that this event has tried to capture the spirit of International Women's Day by celebrating accomplished women doctoral candidates across the globe. Thank you so much for tuning in. Hope you have a great evening ahead. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you for the
Bye.
opportunity. Bye-bye.